Any of us can cerebrally know the right steps to take, or we can have the right logic in our financial life. But all of us really make decisions emotionally. And I think the emotional part of our why is really what is the best place to start when we really think about what do we truly want. And sometimes that requires us to go multiple layers deep because we first think, I just want a nice house. I just want the nice car. I just want twice as much income as I make today. But really, what do we want beneath all of that? I would say if we're really quiet and still and honest, it has a lot more to do with having a legacy and feeling significant and having this sense of fulfillment.
You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question. What has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling. I'm the business psychologist, the author of the 4-Week Vacation and the How to Hire the Best series, as well as the founder of Tap the Potential, where we coach entrepreneurs like you to design sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. Because after all, we believe work supports life, not the other way around. Weekly on the Profit by Design podcast, we bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. Profit Designers, the 4-Week Vacation, the entrepreneur's ultimate guide to taking your life back from your business is now available. Go to 4weekvacation.com, grab a copy of the book, and be sure to follow the steps there to claim your bonuses. When you purchase the book, you are eligible to join me for my upcoming live training, the 4-Week Vacation Better Business, Better Life Jumpstart. Plus, and you'll also get an invitation to an exclusive VIP closed door training with me to identify the true profit potential within your business. Just follow the steps at 4weekvacation.com. And I hope that the 4-Week Vacation book inspires you for what's possible. It's time to take your life back from your business. All right. Well, Rachel, welcome to the Profit by Design podcast.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sabrina, for having me today. It's a pleasure and honor to be here.
Yeah. After I got the opportunity to be on your podcast, The Money Advantage, and I learned what you're up to in this world, I knew we had to get you on the Profit by Design podcast to share your work and your passion with profit designers, because you know this and from our conversation, but we are all about supporting entrepreneurs in designing sustainably profitable businesses that give them more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. One of the side effects of having more money in your bank account than ever is not knowing what to do with it to create a legacy and to really move from that place of financial security and then move towards financial freedom. And I love the work that you're doing because there's so many things that I'm learning about as I follow you guys on the Money Advantage podcast. And I believe there's so much that we don't know, especially when it comes to money and finances. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity for our profit designers to learn something new and different that I imagine many don't know about. So without further ado, I want to give you a full introduction. Rachel Marshall is the co-founder and chief financial educator and content strategist of the Money Advantage. She's known for making money simple, fun, and doable. Currently writing a book about her near-death experience and how it became the springboard for her family's multi-generational legacy of more than money. The Money Advantage is a team of financial freedom architects for wealth creators. Using their 3-step roadmap, you maximize your money by keeping more of what you make, protecting it, and turning it into cash flowing assets. Their family office model brings you the concierge service usually reserved for the ultra wealthy, a team of licensed professionals to coordinate every part of your financial life. This includes strategies for cash flow, long-term tax reduction, estate and business legal planning, creative whole life insurance strategies, i.e. privatized banking, and alternative investments. So, with that, let's dive into this great discussion that we're going to have about managing our money in such a way that it gives us more freedom and security and generates more assets, how we turn our current assets into more assets. So, Rachel, let's start with your near death experience because that is a huge part of your why.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, thank you so much just for asking those questions. I think what's really interesting is that any of us can cerebrally know the right steps to take, or we can have the right logic in our financial life. But all of us really make decisions emotionally. And I think the emotional part of our why is really what is the best place to start when we really think about what do we truly want. And sometimes that requires us to go multiple layers deep because we first think, I just want a nice house. I just want the nice car. I just want twice as much income as I make today. But really, what do we want beneath all of that? I would say if we're really quiet and still and honest, it has a lot more to do with having a legacy and feeling significant and having this sense of fulfillment. So back to my story. I started in the financial services and wealth industry space as an entrepreneur about 10 years ago with my husband. And we've been on a journey for a long time, personally building time and money freedom, but then also helping our clients who are business owners and thought leaders and entrepreneurs to be able to do the same. And what's interesting is that I went through that cerebral logical path. So there's all of these steps. You can make sure you have the right savings and you're putting the right amount into assets that are going to grow for you. And you can still do all of the right things. And we were making a lot of the right steps. But for me, it was about 2.5 years ago. It was May 20th, 2019, right before COVID. I gave birth to my second daughter. And I was healthy. Leading up to that, everything looked like everything was flourishing. I felt great, had all the good energy. I was loving being pregnant, really excited to grow our family. And after delivering her, I ended up having a problem with my placenta that required surgery, which caused me to hemorrhage, which required a blood transfusion of replacing nearly all of the blood in my body. And it was very severe to the point that I ended up unconscious for 45 minutes in ICU, bleeding uncontrollably. And my husband's getting a report that we don't know if she's going to make it. And I was blissfully unaware as I was unconscious how desperate that situation was. But as I came to, and I just had this awareness of, my goodness, I'm alive. This is amazing. People have loved me, have fought for me, have been there to see me through this. We just really started thinking, what does this mean for our children? What if we weren't there? How can we make sure that not only are we making financial decisions today that are going to set them up for success, but not just giving them all the money that they would ever need, because money does not solve problems the way that we first think of. Really, we have to be able to carry this character traits, this value system, these attributes of truly putting meaning into our children's lives and then providing not only the funding, but the capability to create the financial assets so that they can live out those dreams. And it just started clicking for me that I couldn't just plan for my time and money freedom in my own life and saying, if I just get a certain cash flow amount and we're just time and money free, then we can live what we want with our kids. But what if I don't have the time to be able to get to that point? How can I live right now and create this legacy for my children? How can I help them to flourish and be able to create this on their own as true wealth creators, not just as someone who's receiving mom and dad's inheritance if something were to happen? And that's where it went really, really deep and super personal for me.
Yeah, I think that's such an important aha or insight because we think about, well, if I have some life insurance in place, then the financial needs are taken care of. But there is thinking through how you're going to manage your life and how, what the values are that you want your children to own and live, and how does all of that get conveyed. So I'm hearing a much broader perspective on creating legacy and looking. And the other thing that I really appreciate is you're looking at the now and the future. And so much of financial planning is all about the future and, protecting against something that can happen in the future. And you're saying, well, we got to look at the now too and figure out what this looks like. So as you started on this journey, what were some of the initial things that you started putting in place for yourself or started doing differently for yourself and in your family?
That's a really good question. So I'll back up a little bit because our transformation has been a long time in the making as well. So it was interesting that pivot point made it much more personal for me. But even before that, we had started a business. This was about 10 years ago. And we had a situation where we were storing cash. At the time, we were putting it in gold and silver, and we were planning for being financially stable way into the future should there be a lot of disruption in the economy. What we were not thinking about is the value of liquidity. And your audience probably knows what that term is, but just for anyone who might not be familiar, because it's not a word we throw around very often, it means, can I access and use my cash? Can I access my assets? What if I need capital? What if I want to start a business, or I want to grow this area of business, or I want to put $100,000 tomorrow into a marketing campaign that will generate $500,000 in revenue? Or what if I need to touch my money, not just I'm setting it on the shelf and I'm leaving it there to compound and grow for the typical way of thinking about retirement? What if I want to use that to create a cash flowing asset right now? And that's what we teach. We teach that it's not really about just the retirement focus. It's really about how do you use your capital to put it into cash flowing assets, which is businesses and growing your business. So we had all of our cash tied up in a way that we couldn't access it. When we wanted to get our cash, the value of the gold and silver was about half of what we purchased it at. And we had to go through a selling process. You can't just sell to anyone. It has to be somebody willing to receive it. And you pay a cost as well on selling that capital. I think it's called a premium. I don't actually know the official term, but we were losing money because we failed to recognize the need for liquidity. So liquidity just means I've got this cash that I can use, right? So then we started saying, how do we store money well so that we can have the access to our cash when it is important for us to use that capital? And then how do we make sure it's not only sitting there, but how do we make sure it's working as fast and as hard as possible? We don't just want it sitting on the sidelines like most people would say it's doing in a bank savings account, earning, I don't know, right now, 0.02%,
Itty bitty amount.
very itty bitty. So having cash is an extremely valuable thing, but then you want to make sure it's doing as much as possible for you and really being efficient. You've got that safety, liquidity, and growth. So we started personally looking at what is the best tool for storing capital. And that's when we came across infinite banking for ourselves, which is also known as privatized banking.
So what is privatized banking in a nutshell?
So in a nutshell, really, this is a strategy. It's not just a product. A lot of times people can quickly go to, well, what do I need to buy off the shelf? And how do I make sure it's the right specifications and the right color and shape and size? So first, we need to think about what is the strategy, the bigger picture, because I believe principles come first, then strategy, then products. So if we think about the principle, I want to have cash that I can access and use. I want to be in control so that I don't need to go asking somebody else for capital or seeing if I qualify to get a HELOC or a loan or have some other person that is a barrier between me and capital. I want to be able to access it. And I don't want to have to pay taxes if I'm going to go access my money right now. And I don't want a penalty because I'm less than 59 and a half. So I want cash that is accessible to me. I want it growing as quickly as possible as well. Compound interest is even better. And then I want to make sure it's safe so it's not going to drop in value. So when I talk about a strategy, I mean a strategy of holding cash. If I can think of having a reserve tank or a place where I'm keeping capital, I want to have the opportunity to access and use that cash for anything that I want. And I would love for it to keep growing at the same time so it doesn't interrupt the compounding, because that actually shaves off a lot of the potential you can create with your cash. So the strategy meaning I'm holding this cash, it's safe, liquid, and growing. I want to be able to use it. So where is the best place that I can store that cash? Well, we could think about any potential tool. I could say I can just put the cash in my backyard, right? And I could say it's dug in a hole in a coffee can somewhere. And when I need to use it, I can pull it up and I can use that money. Well, that's going to be generally safe unless a bandit or a dog digs it up and carries it off.
More likely in my case, it would be the dog.
Right? Might not even be a thief. So is it generally safe? I mean, well, it's not going to like go from $100,000 and it's not going to turn into $5,000. It's not going to diminish in value, but is it going to keep up with inflation? Probably not. Is it growing? No. It's generally safe. Is it liquid? Yeah, sure, I can access it. Well, I don't necessarily just want to hold it in a coffee can in the backyard. I don't necessarily just want it in the bank. I'm barely earning any interest. I don't just want to put it into the four walls of my house, into home equity, because, as I mentioned, you have to go qualify for the bank to get access to the cash that you've put in the four walls of your house. And even if you've made all these extra payments, that doesn't mean they're going to say, oh, well, good for you. I'm going to give you this cash. You don't have a job now, so you can't pay me back. I don't see that you're financially qualified. Sorry, I'm not going to give you access to your money.
So you've lost control of the money at that point.
Yes. And control is the most important word here. So as I'm really thinking through where can I store this capital, I've found that the best place is in infinite banking, again, known as privatized banking. What this is the strategy of using a whole life insurance policy. Now, I might have lost some people because whole life insurance doesn't sound like a place to store cash, and it sounds extremely boring. And many people have heard that whole life insurance is not a good investment. So let's just set all of those challenges aside for a second and think about a whole life insurance policy gives you the opportunity to store capital in the form of cash value. When the policy is properly designed for maximum efficiency, you not only have cash growing in cash value that's safe, it's not going to drop in value. In fact, the life insurance companies hold more reserves per their claims than the bank does. They have dollar for dollar reserves. They also that capital is liquid because you can access your cash value through a life insurance loan. As a policy owner, you have the right and the freedom contractually to do that. And then it's also growing because it's growing with compound interest. Inside the policy, you have interest and dividends. And I don't want to get too technical because those details don't matter as much. The principle, though, is you have this safe, liquid, growing capital that is the best place I've found to store cash. And on top of that, I also have this death benefit that allows me to think generationally and think about the legacy that I'm leaving. So that's the product. Now, the strategy is that I can then borrow against my cash value, not from it. And when I borrow against my cash value, that allows my cash to keep growing while I'm also using it in another location at the same time. So that strategy of using the policy is what makes it infinite.
Okay. And so that's very different. And you mentioned, because people have all kinds of biases about whole life insurance. There's lots of, talk about that. So this is about using the policy. It's not just parking the money there.
Yes. Actually, that's very insightful that you said that, because often I will say, if you think that you're just going to get a magic product and set it on the shelf and set it and forget it, that's not going to give you the advantages because that's just the product. We also need the strategy of using it, and it allows you to be the bank, to leverage your capital, to put it to work in two places at the same time. It's earning interest and dividends inside the policy, and it's also earning a rate of return outside the policy as you're putting it to work in your business or in real estate investments or in another asset somewhere that's cash flowing. So it's absolutely the strategy of also using, almost like driving your policy. You're not just putting it in, parking it in the garage, you're driving it.
Yeah. And so I think it's such a critical point, because that's where we have to, I would imagine, we have to be very thoughtful about how we're going to use it and make sure we're putting it into a good asset that's going to generate a return on investment.
Yes.
So let's just talk about that. What are some options at that point? You mentioned real estate, investing back into the business. What else do you see people doing?
That's a really good question, because the amazing thing is that when you have cash value inside of a life insurance policy, you have access to use that. Now, we've seen people use it even for, and I'll just say this, expenses, a vacation, a home remodel. Now, we don't want to limit our thinking to just expenses, because that's not going to generate a return that's going to bring cash back into your hands. But it is a potential use. It is a potential use of your cash to be able to use it for your child's college education. It is a potential use for you to use it for supplemental income in the future. And as we start expanding the lens of what we can do with this capital, it gives us a lot more freedom, because now we don't have to compartmentalize everything. Here's my long-term care plan. Here's my life insurance. Here's my investments. Here's my college planning. Here's my retirement planning, and thinking about everything segmented, because really your money is all part of one big system. And if you can optimize the whole system, you can do everything better.
I love that. That is a holistic view on assets, and how do you optimize those assets?
It absolutely is a holistic view. And I didn't mean to sidestep your question, so let me come back to it. So this idea of then you can use it for an expense, you can also use it for opportunities. And I like to frame any type of capital investment where I'm going to get a return as an opportunity. It's an investment. I'm investing somewhere, cash is going to return. That might be looking outside of the range of investments and looking at alternative investments, places like oil and gas, or looking in real estate, as I mentioned, or looking at how you might use assets to generate income back to you. That could be for a speaker and coach who is going to use capital to fund a book.
I don't know anything about that.
I don't know any people like that either. You've just launched a book. I'm about to launch my book. It's just very interesting that we can think outside the box and say, well, there's costs associated with building a business in any capacity, even in the thought leader space. And having that access to capital then means, well, hey, now I don't have to look just to go put something on a credit card or get a business loan. I have cash that I can use. That makes you much more favorable in the eyes of the bank then, because you have cash.
That's a really good point, because it's that whole concept of your personal balance sheet, and that there are assets there that you're utilizing to create more assets. And then the bank is much more willing to lend you money should you need it, because you have assets.
Yes, and sometimes, people can even capitalize against their policy with a bank loan. So I don't want to get too technical and complicated, but if you have cash value, you can automatically qualify for a life insurance loan from the life insurance company to borrow against that capital. And that's a secured loan against your cash value. Now, you also could go to a bank, a separate banking institution, and say, I have $300,000 of cash value in my life insurance policy. Can you secure that or use that as the capital to secure a loan? So you just have a lot of options. And I think whenever you have more options, you have the ability to make choices. You're not limited or stuck to saying, well, this is the only way I can do something. And that just gives you a lot more freedom then to have the cash in your pocket and be able to use it, or take a conventional loan if that makes more sense for you. But just having that access to capital just gives you tremendous freedom.
So how do you see privatized banking really impacting all areas of our lives in a positive way?
That's a really good question. And what I see as kind of a framework or a model for how somebody structures their financial life to achieve and build time and money freedom. I'm using a little different vernacular because I think a lot of times we think, well, retirement's the goal. My personal goal and most of our clients' goals is really to build cash flow from assets. Well, if we want to get to that position, first we want to start from, how do I use the current income model that I have, whether I'm a business owner and I'm having income come off the business, whether I still am in a W-2 position and I have that job, whether I have multiple sources of income. We want to, as you train people how to do, Dr. Sabrina, to really keep as much of that as possible, being efficient. Then we want to protect the capital. So I'm layering this. At the bottom, I see this basement level, this foundation piece to keep as much as we make as possible. That's increasing your cash flow from your current income. Then that's going to create this capital source, this reserves, these store of money. Well, I want to protect that. I don't just want to jump into saying, I want to make the money and invest the money. Because if we skip over the protection component, we can forget that it can all be taken from us. And so things like insurance and legal planning, all the forms of insurance. This is your health insurance, your auto insurance, your liability insurance. Building that protection component is extremely crucial. And then finally saying, now I have the storage, the capital stores. How do I put those to work in the greatest way for me? And how do I increase capital or cash flow from assets? So if we look at these three layers, this keep as much as I make as possible, the second layer is protection, the third layer is making more money and building time and money freedom and creating this contribution and this legacy. Well, first, life insurance helps me keep more of the money I make because now I'm not compartmentalizing into all these different things. Instead, I'm putting my stores all in one warehouse. I'm building this war chest in my financial life, and that's creating a lot of efficiency so that I can be aware of my cash flows. And then it helps with the protection component because it's not only life insurance, but it also protects you just by having savings. Having savings is this huge protection element that gives you the peace of mind to make decisions because you're not in a scary, scarcity, insecure place. You have that cash.
Yes. So I'll just share a funny story with you. Probably 6 years ago or so now, maybe a little longer than that. It was right after I started using Profit First and I had other clients using Profit First. It was about a year into us piloting Profit First with our clients. I was in the liquor aisle of the grocery store one Friday evening, and I ran into a client there, and she and I were chatting, and she said, by the way, I really need to get on your calendar. I have a big question. And she said, we have so much money and we don't know what to do with it because of Profit First in the business. And I said, okay, we're in the liquor aisle of the grocery store. We're going to get jumped in the parking lot. Let's save this conversation. We're going to have this conversation next week on a phone call. But that really is, I think that's just such an epitome of what happens. We have so many people who listen to the Profit by Design podcast who are implementing Profit First. And one of the things that happens is the owner's pay account all of a sudden is very large. And so many business owners are used to hardly ever paying themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they see all this money sitting in their owner's pay account, number one, there's guilt that sets in because I don't need this much. I've lived on a poverty level for years. I don't need all this money. And so one of the things that I always go to is, well, have you funded retirement? Do you have disability insurance? Do you have life insurance? How's your health insurance? If because if you have a high deductible policy, maybe you could do something a little better for yourself. So there's that failure to think of what do we really need because we've been living in scarcity for so long. And I'm not a financial planner. So I always just kind of say at that point, there's lots of options. You need to go talk to a financial planner and look at these things. But I really feel I've had lots of business owners say to me, I feel like my business is my best investment. That's my retirement plan. And I know there's so much wrong with that logic because a lot of business owners think I'm going to sell my business at some point. And it's not, the value is not going to be there typically that the business owner envisions will be there. And we've actually had some of our clients and myself look at our businesses from a sale point versus an asset generation point. And when you look at a business from the fact that, okay, if you put Profit First in place, it becomes an asset because you have profit that's getting generated pay. And then as you're setting it up so that it can run without your daily involvement, now you have time freedom and an asset generating entity here. And so we have people who said, I thought I wanted to sell my business, but you know what? Now that I'm working with better clients and I know how to get a team and, we have a lot less drama, I don't think I want to sell it. I think it's a great asset generator and, cash is coming off of it. So that cash coming off of it is that point where, I get interested in what you're talking about because, there's more that could be done. I personally am a maximizer. So, I'm always looking at how do we maximize all these opportunities. So there's more than what's needed in the business because if you're going to run the business efficiently, you don't need to be plowing. You shouldn't be plowing all the cash back in the business. And that's only one bucket. So you want to have other buckets. And so what you're describing here is an opportunity to use that cash to create more security and also have cash freely available that's not tied necessarily to a business. So it creates some diversity in the portfolio.
It absolutely does. I love so much about what you just shared because we believe most of our clients are business owners. I should just give that preface and that caveat. So we believe that if you are operating a business, that probably is one of your best investments. Normally, you're going to get a much higher return in business because it's an area that you have knowledge and control. And we believe in focusing on what you have knowledge and control, or where you have knowledge and control. You can get out if you choose to. You can increase the revenue if you choose to, because it's a place that you've really developed this mastery. Now, if you are storing cash and you're thinking, well, I don't just want to plow it only back into the business, I want it to do more for me. Well, if you're using something like life insurance or infinite banking, you have an opportunity to store capital that you can use if an opportunity arises in the business or in your personal life. And at the same time, you are creating an opportunity that you can potentially maybe step into real estate investing, or maybe step into something else that you can put capital to work, because as you borrow against the cash flow or cash value, borrow against the policy, put your dollars to work now in another asset. If that's generating cash flow, you have the capital to repay your loan, and then it continues to grow. So you're maximizing your efficiency with that cash. And when you're looking at the dividends and the interest that it's generating inside the policy, if it's properly designed, you're getting a significant uninterrupted compound growth inside the policy. And then you're creating this legacy for the future because there's a death benefit. And the amazing thing about that is that it's a significant improvement to anyone's life. And especially if you're in a position of storing cash and saying, well, my general way of thinking is I'm just going to put it in the bank. Well, at some point you want those dollars to go to work for you. And I've heard someone say, I don't just want to save, I want to be investing, because when I save, it feels like half of my army is asleep, like it's not working for me. And that it stuck with me forever. I mean, it's just very visual and a visceral feeling of how sometimes we can feel like, well, that savings is growing, but I feel like it's not doing as much as it could for me. But when you plug it into a resource or a tool like infinite banking, and again, there's other options. This is not the one thing. I'm not an advocate that you should do only one thing with your money. But if life insurance and infinite banking is a significant part of your strategy, it can become a cornerstone and a foundation for you to put cash into other assets that will generate cash flow and be in a position where you're not just thinking about, I've created cash flow in my lifetime, but how can I pass this on to future generations? And I'll just say briefly that part of the book that I have coming out about my story incorporates this idea that we need to pass on values and have a family guidance system along with the right estate planning to carry our legacy. But life insurance can be a key part of funding your multi-generational legacy of more than money, because it can be the storage tank that you can then use as a family bank, where your family members can ask for and receive loans from the family bank and repay the loans. So maybe your child takes a college loan and then repays that into the family capital stores. And this can perpetuate over multiple generations, because I can write into my trust and my legal documents that my desire is that when my life insurance proceeds pay out to my children, that as much life insurance will be purchased on their lives with those proceeds. And I have this leveraged up death benefit that's always way higher than the cash that I've paid into the policy. And so this can be a tool that magnifies the capital available in future generations. And I'm along the way teaching them the responsibility and stewardship so that they can use it well.
Oh my gosh, that's just mind blowing right there. I have so many questions and I'm noticing every time. Oh my gosh. So I want, first off, for everyone to know that you have the Money Advantage podcast, and briefly give a description of the topics that you cover on the Money Advantage podcast.
So we cover anything that relates to a business owner controlling their cash and being in a position of control. So they're generating cash flow from assets and really enjoying their money more. So we do a lot of our own shows where we're talking specifically in depth about life insurance, privatized banking, and infinite banking, as I mentioned. So we uncover a lot of pieces of that, questions that people have, legislative changes, and how that impacts policy design. So we get really technical. We have a lot of full disclosure. And I think most of the people that come back to us and say, I'm booking an appointment because of the content that you have on your podcast, they always say that they're really thankful that it shares so much information that many other people don't share. And we do it in a simple way that makes sense, but that gives the big picture. We don't believe in withholding information, but we also don't want to overwhelm people so that they can't make decisions. So we help business owners and enterprising families to have the content and the education that they need so they can have clarity to make financial decisions that leave them in control.
Well, I certainly experienced that today as we've talked. You took some very high level concepts that I've heard about previously, I've studied up on previously, and still didn't get. And you broke it down today, like just boom, boom, boom. And it was crystal clear. So I really appreciate that. And that's my experience of the episodes that I've listened to on your podcast. I think you guys are doing a great job with that. You have a book coming out. It is currently with advanced readers. So that means it's very close to being ready, Rachel. That's so exciting. Tell us about your book. What's the title and what are you covering in it?
Yes, it's called 7 Generations. And this is all about how to design a multi-generational legacy of more than money. And so it plays off of and starts from my story of my near-death experience and really the transformation that my family and I went through in thinking about our legacy and the need to do that really, really well. And so then it walks through the 3 pillars that somebody needs to have this indestructible legacy that's not just a giant inheritance, because many people know that that can just lead to heirs that are trust fund babies that are, unfortunately, it can have this feeling of corrupting them. And so I talk about that myth and talk about how we can overcome that. There's another tremendous challenge that can happen in wealthy families, and it's this shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, where one generation creates the wealth, the next experiences it, the third spends it all because they're used to that experience, but they don't have the principles and the stewardship in place to manage it well. And so this book walks through how we can make sure that we have this 7 generation thinking to think about how do the decisions I'm making today not only impact my kids, but my grandkids, and how do I think 7 generations ahead? This wasn't my initial concept. The Iroquois Indians started this concept, and I'm using that to say, how can we look as far forward into creating our legacy as possible? So the book does launch very soon. I don't have a date yet, though. It will be within the next few months.
That's fantastic. I can't wait till it comes out. I know also you have a free guide right now that you're going to share with our profit designers. And I'm so glad you are, because I think you've really opened up a lot of questions that people are going to have. And this is a guide in relation to privatized banking. So if you'll say a little bit more about that and how our listeners and viewers can get their hands on that.
Yes. So we have I'm going to probably forget what the actual name of it is called, but we have a free guide. If you go to privatizedbankingsecrets.com/free guide, or I think it just automatically pulls up if you've never been to our website before. You can also go to themoneyadvantage.com, and there's a button right on the homepage that will take you over to this as well. So this guide is basically, it's the investor's guide to learning how to earn a return in 2 places at the same time with the same money. It's a basic introduction to what privatized banking is. And again, I should have told this in the beginning, privatized banking and infinite banking are interchangeable terms for the same thing. So this is just a concept for how you can, as an investor, maximize your returns without taking on additional risk, and how life insurance is a key piece of making that happen. If you want to go deeper, you'll get onto our email list through that. We do have a course on infinite banking as well, if you want to really dive into how does this work for me. And if you're ready for a personal conversation, you can always book that call on themoneyadvantage.com main website as well. So we have a host of resources and tools. I think our podcast has been out for about, it's either 4 years or 5 years now. So we have a lot of material that is free and accessible to anyone if you want to learn about that some more.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. It's clear that you've put your heart and soul into what you're doing, and you're coming from a place of service. And I love how you're just bringing new ideas for business owners of how to really leverage their assets and not just have them sit there and do it. Again, I can't say enough about the model that you just described, how things are put in place for taking care of security and then moving up and looking at, well, what else can be done with this? So many good viewpoints shared here.
Yes. Well, Dr. Sabrina, it's just been such a pleasure to connect with you today. I love hearing people who are very congruent in creating that freedom. I love your mission that life should support our business and not the other way around.
Work should support life.
Work should support life. I'm like, I know what it means. I'm like, did I get the words the wrong way? I think I did.
I know it's easy to mix them up, but work should support life. I think that's what I see the congruency in what you're doing with that message. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because I hope this has opened our profit designers' eyes to new things that they could be considering they hadn't been aware of was out there previously. Or if they'd been aware of it and maybe bypassed it because it seemed complicated or you didn't quite understand, I think you broke it down in a very simple way today. And I know that our listeners can go to your podcast, the free guide that you shared, they can go to your website, your book when it comes out. So there's lots of resources that you've created. So I appreciate you, Rachel.
Well, Dr. Sabrina, thank you so much. I know that your audience is fascinating if they're following you and really being able to be leaning into learning and continuing to grow. And that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. We have some great listeners out there. All right. Well, have a great day, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sabrina.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Entrepreneurs Take Your Life Back Facebook community at tapthepotential.com/group. Share your aha moments from today's episode, ask me questions, and join in on the fun with your fellow entrepreneurs on the journey to designing sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. And finally, share today's episode with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this. If you've gotten value from today's show, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you are a repeat listener of the podcast, know that we greatly appreciate you at Tap the Potential. And to that end, I have a request. Please consider leaving us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Our reviews help other entrepreneurs like you to find us. Be a part of our movement to help entrepreneurs take your life back from your business.